Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Alex Aanderud, a world-renowned expert in leadership, communication, and human behavior. With a background in aerospace engineering and military flight testing, he has also advanced certifications in integrative psychology. Alex is the founder of VitalSpark.ai, where he's helped teams and leaders unlock potential, align with purpose, and lead with authenticity. And that should have been a lot easier for me to say, Alex. Lead with authenticity. Welcome to the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me today.
I am so excited to have this conversation. Love topics where we can talk about things that are impactful, powerful, but actually really very positive. And so talk to us a little bit about what you're doing and why it's so important today.
It's interesting. As a child, I experienced a lot of trauma, physical, sexual abuse. I dealt with a lot of different medical challenges. I had a lot growing up. And in middle school, I was told I would never graduate. And it was a lot less to do with my skill and ability, but the ability of the leadership to help me get through the challenges that I had. And too often today, what we find is a culture where a lot of people are saying, and I hear it all the time, nobody wants to work. We can't get the right employees. We can't get our team to perform. And it's not a challenge of the employees or the workforce. It's actually a challenge of leaders' ability to truly create a space that is safe for their employees, exciting for their employees, and to find ways to adapt their leadership to truly motivate their team. And so what I've done is I've been able to take my experience in systems and engineering and integrative psychology and create a system that allows leaders to understand their people at a very deep level, and then utilizing AI, get advice on how to adapt to each one individually. And what this does is it increases their intent, their engagement, their retention, their ability to really drive the motivation and productivity of their team, and ultimately the profitability of their business.
You touched on all of the key points, right? We want good people who are highly productive, and all of those things go together and they drive the profitability of a business. So you are pulling all of the levers and you're using AI to do it in a way that isn't scary to people.
Right. And one of the challenges is people look at AI as a replacement for human connection or for human performance. And what I say is AI is actually an augmentation. It's a tool. And so for me, what I've done is being able to integrate human behavior and psychology into AI. It allows the AI to understand and connect with people at a much deeper level. But what it's really done is it's allowed us to connect with ourselves and understand ourselves and others. So I've got a single mom who is using the AI to navigate a challenging relationship with her co-parent. And he'll send a text and she'll copy and paste it in, and it'll break down where and how he's manipulating or what he's doing to try and make her feel bad. And then it walks through how she can regulate herself and show up in a way to be supportive for her son.
Okay, there's a lot in that. So let's talk about what the AI, what VitalSpark is there to actually do and that interaction, because it has to have been trained with principles of psychology. And
Yes.
then it has to learn the voice and the person that is maybe the client, the single mother in this context, but then also the voice of the other who is the less healthy member of the dialogue. So talk to me about how all of that works.
Yeah. So in a business perspective, I'm going to start there because it's a little bit simpler. You run profiles for your entire organization, and the AI then has access to everybody's information and can give you advice on how to lead those individuals. From an individual perspective, you take your own assessment and the AI then knows you. So in this mother's case, she took an assessment and it understood her attachment theory. It understood. So there's the work of Dr. Dan Siegel, Lindsay Gibson talk about attachment theory and how we develop a belief in ourselves and our environment, how we're raised. And understanding that, her intrinsic motivators, her polarity, masculine, feminine, what's important to her, how she sees the world. The way that I liken it is you talked about needing to understand his voice. You don't necessarily need to understand his voice. What you need, and this is my mindset on it, is if I'm red and I'm describing purple, the software can understand that he's blue. And then it can articulate blue in a way that red can understand blue, because red is seeing purple and purple's not what's there. Blue is what's there. But if it tries to describe blue, it can't, because the red can't understand blue. So what it does is it translates blue into a red language so that the red gets it. So a great example of this is somebody who's altruistic, who loves to help people for the sake of helping people. It's just what they do. But somebody who's a high economic, who loves to do things because of what they get out of it, in order for them to understand the altruistic, they need to understand what they get out of it is they love the way it feels. But if you say that to an altruistic, it takes away that feeling, because now they're doing it for a selfish reason. That's the examples. Like if you talk about it from a blue perspective, they do it because they love helping. That's true. But if you explain that to an economic, they don't get it. That's the red language. But if in the red, you say they do it because they like the way it feels, and you take that red language and you describe that to the blue, they go, that's selfish. Now it takes away the feeling of doing good for others. And so those small adjustments in your language when you're working in your family or when you're working in your business drastically change the way that it feels, which then changes the way that you show up and produce.
Absolutely. The use of language and how we communicate, and how my language is different than your language, I think. We don't know each other well enough to know for sure, but I'm going to go with we're probably a little bit different. And being able to translate that, but to have the AI to coach me through our growing business relationship or our troubled business relationship, I can be more authentic and vulnerable with the AI because it's not judging me. It is not responsible for my performance, my pay, my bonus, my whatever. Having that sort of objective, helpful tool inside of a business sounds really intriguing to me.
And it's also available when the thought crosses your mind at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's the
Maybe
other.
we are more alike than not, because 2 a.m. is when it always starts.
Right. And it's where it's like you're laying there and you can't get it off your brain. And it's like, what do I do? Or when you're getting prepped for that meeting or something happens, I'm riding in a car and I have an idea and it's like, hey, how do I handle this situation? It's available and it's there.
So the things that the training that went into the AI, people who are listening are probably familiar with Myers-Briggs, probably predictive index, probably right, the list of all of the different things that we could go through. How does VitalSpark, how is it trained? What's the depth and dimension, and what does that all look like?
So almost every assessment that you mentioned, and most of the ones that are out there, are based on behavioral tendencies, or they're based on more of a surface level observable traits. The challenge with those is, first off, they're limited spectrum. So like DISC is one of the most common ones that a lot of people use. It's 4 spectrums. The Vital Spark is over 50 spectrums. And so we use a lot more dimensions to do our analysis. The second is that instead of looking at the result, behavior, we analyze more on developmental psychology, understanding what drives the behavior. So for instance, instead of looking at, I'm going to talk relationship because it's a really easy example. Instead of looking at somebody who is aloof or distant or unwilling to make a commitment, those are all different behaviors. We identify that somebody is avoidant in their attachment style, which goes back to that Dan Siegel and Lindsay Gibson. And avoidant is somebody who's learned from developing as a child that if there is an expectation, they will be let down or they will let the person down. And so they keep people at a distance in order to keep themselves safe, because they learn that they can't trust anyone to stay around. So in order to do that, they need a reassurance. So understanding what's driving the behavior instead of focusing on the behavior itself allows you to understand how to create an environment where the person can produce. And for me, that looks at seen, safe, accepted, and protected creates an empowered state. And so when somebody feels truly seen, safe, accepted, and protected, they're able to venture out and try things. They're able to do things, being able to take risks. That's where you are empowered, is when you have that. So a leader's ability to adapt and create that, but understanding developmentally what's creating that. Same thing when you look at polarity, masculine versus feminine polarity. Masculine polarity is about intention, direction, structure, and protection. So understanding what is our intention, where are we headed, what is the structure we're going to use to get there, and then protecting all of that. The feminine is actually the movement. Most people don't realize that the idea of getting stuff done people attribute to the masculine, and it's not. The movement is actually the feminine. The expansion is the feminine energy. But that's also related to that acceptance and surrender, which is also feminine. But they can only move when there is a structure that is safe enough to move in and it's being protected. And so understanding where are they on that spectrum shows you what is it that you need to establish for them and what do you need to hold in order for them to produce. And so these are the different things. So Vital Spark looks more at developmental psychology and looks more at what drives the behavior and uses that to be able to influence more of the unconscious behaviors as opposed to the conscious surface level.
I want to talk a little bit more about that because with the other models, right, that are behaviorally driven, and I'll do the air quotes in the big statement, they claim, right, that you are who you are, right? That you take the profile and it is 100% accurate and it is you.
Yep. This is my company used to be called You Don't Know Disc because when I learned the disc model within the first year, I started teaching the people who've been doing disc for 40 years disc. And after talking with them for about 5 minutes, they'd be like, I don't know disc. Because as an engineer, they were telling me it measured behavior. And I said, okay, but behavior changes over time. And they're like, yes. I'm like, but you're telling me the disc doesn't change. And they're like, yes. I'm like, how can something that measures a movable thing not move? And they couldn't answer my question. And so the idea that the assessments are fixed, any of the assessments, that's not viable based on their own definition of their assessment on what they're analyzing. Now, our assessment, Vital Spark, it's not fixed, but from a developmental psychology, what happens in a high stress environment when you get triggered where you lose that feeling of seen, safe, accepted, or protected, there is an aspect from developmental psychology that's been imprinted that you revert back into what you've been trained at. No matter how much development you do, you can override it with skill, but that's still your default. So that's why the Vital Spark provides better insight, is because often when people are regulated, you don't have to help manage as much. It's when they're deregulated or when they're dysregulated that you're going to have to step in, which is where the Vital Spark assessment is actually most accurate.
And I think that's a really important point for the listeners to really grasp in the reality of this, right? We are dynamic beings. We have experiences that are foundational, that have shaped how we show up, how we respond to certain things. But in our journeys in life, we learn skills, we learn capabilities where we can override and regulate our behaviors to be appropriate in certain circumstances. But when triggered, right, we default back to some of that natural self. And being able to use something like Vital Spark that adapts with us as we go through our life experience and our, let's just go with life experience, it is going to be more reasonable in the guidance that it's giving because it is not trying to tie us back to a fixed idea that is, I agree, false, because I can show up in any quadrant and disc I want to because I can answer questions in different ways.
Exactly. Now, one of the fun things is like when I took the Vital Spark assessment, now I created the Vital Spark assessment. I took the Vital Spark assessment. And when I took it, one of the things that identified as my struggle is my ability to understand and relate with other people. Now, what I do for a living is I teach people how to understand other people. But the thing that most people don't realize is it was actually a really big struggle for me. And it was because of extensive understanding of myself, trying to figure out what was going on, why I was struggling so hard, and truly diving in to understand other people that I got so good at it. And so the Vital Spark assessment sees what my actual challenge was, even though I'm highly skilled, which blew me away. But beyond that, the ability to adapt and put these pieces, the other piece that's really important, and this is something that if you take nothing else away, one of the most important things I think everyone needs to realize, if dysregulation is what causes you to default back to old unconscious behaviors from childhood, like back to being a 7-year-old kid, your job is not to be better at handling stress, handling situations, but to increase your capacity to feel it without it dysregulating you. So instead of being able to create a situation where you don't feel pain, create an ability where you can feel more pain without it being a problem. And this is where a lot of people don't want to go. is realistically, it's like, it's not about being able to eliminate stress from your life because you're going to have stress. It's how can you experience more stress and hold it and build that capacity in your neurology to be able to be in it more for a longer duration without it crippling you. And that's like, for me, being able to read people and understand people without getting dysregulated, it's become such an innate skill where I have such compassion for people, where before I'd tell them to go jump off a cliff after about 2 minutes because I just didn't like people. Now I have so much more. I still do it in my head, but now I've got a lot more capacity to hold that space. But because of that, I can help more people.
Mhm.
But I had to build that capacity up.
And, and as I'm listening to that, right, there are things, and I think everybody listening has something in their world that they've had to do to grow, to function in the world, in business, things that are very much not how they would choose to do them. And I'll use the simple one for me, right? I am a naturally highly introverted personality. To do the things I do for a living, to have this conversation, to record it, put it out to the universe, right? That is so against my nature, right? But that's the set of skills and capabilities that I've learned, that I've applied, and whether you think I do them well or not, who cares? I'm doing them, which is not natural to me. We all do these things, and having a tool set to help us navigate through, and that's a positive use of those types of experiences. But when we have those things that trigger us to become deregulated, knowing how to build that capacity. I use the introvert example because for me to go and attend an in-person networking event, right? The amount of energy that I expend to go through that, call it an hour, will take me time to recover from that because I'm stretching, right? My capacity is growing. And over time, 1 hour of networking equated to like a half a day of not doing anything of any consequence because I was exhausted. Over time, right, I function like a human being. I go and I interact with human beings who are scary, right? And then can continue to do the things that run a business. We all do these things. Understanding and having VitalSpark to help us navigate through building that capacity, that capability, I think is unlike anything I've ever seen or heard before. Will you talk to us a little bit about how you built it, why you built it, what it is that you're solving for with it?
Well, I want to address one thing before we do. So that question I'll come back to, but you talk about the introvert, and it's a really good example that also leads into why I built it. I was working with a salesperson who was in real estate and was at team to team to team and wasn't performing. Every team was teaching her the scripts to say, what to do, how to do the presentation, and she was really unsuccessful. And finally, I found a team that she was working with, and I said, hey, can I lead her for a moment? And they said yes. And what I did was I taught her how to ask questions that allowed them to talk, taught her how to guide those questions to discover what was really important to them, and then to simply say, are you ready to move forward? And she became one of the best salespeople on that team because instead of trying to put her as an extrovert operating in doing her presentations, I taught her how to ask questions as an introvert, listen, and grab the information needed in order to move the process forward. I used her strength to help her be successful in a way that she could still do the role, but do it her way. And that's why I created Vital Spark, is because as a consultant, I was using the DISC model to teach people they're all four. There is no right or wrong. Everything has a strength. Everyone has a weakness. But the challenge was is it was only four spectrums and it wasn't enough. And when I learned about AI, I went, this is cool. And then I realized I could actually teach it to understand people the way that I do, because people had a hard time grasping four spectrums, just the four, understanding that there is good in all of them. There's bad in all of them, high and low on all of them. So how did I build Vital Spark was I started listing out all of the different ways I look at people. The high, the medium, the low, what they meant, what they were. I look at it as a unique frequency, and our relationship is an interference pattern between the frequency you emit and the frequency I emit. And there's either resonance or dissonance. We don't have to be the same, but our frequencies need to interact in a way where it doesn't create disharmony between the two of us. So sometimes that actually means getting more distance in how we are like. not more similarity. Because I think of it like a piano, a minor fifth, which if you don't know music, that's fine. But a minor fifth is like this chord. It's called the devil's chord and it sounds horrible. But if you go up a half a step, which is just one step further, it's called a perfect fifth and it's God's chord. And it's the most amazing sound. But all you did to get there was you actually went further away. And so sometimes the adjustment is very small, but it's getting further away. But nobody was really being able to understand at the level I was, but the AI could. And I just kept feeding it more and more information. I ended up with over 500 pages I wrote that I fed into this thing and understanding how I read people. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the challenges? And as I was talking with it, I go back and forth and it kept saying, oh, well, this. I'm like, that's not quite right. And so I kept refining it until all of a sudden it started giving the same advice I was giving. And I ran it with my clients. And it was funny because we would ask a question and I would answer it, and then we'd feed it to the AI. It would give the exact same answer I did, but with more detail and with more suggestions afterwards. So it actually started giving the exact same advice, but better and more. And at this point, a lot of my clients stopped using me, but I keep refining it because I keep checking it. And I now use it as my coach because it thinks a lot like I do, because it understands that everybody, and this is the core concept that I really taught the AI, is that everybody's perfect the way that they are, but they can always be better, and that there is no challenge with those being the same. And holding dichotomies that are conflicting without there being a conflict is something AI doesn't have a challenge with, but we do. And being able to understand harmony, and that two people who have different strengths and weaknesses can actually both be perfect, it gets, and we struggle with. And so that's what I did to train it. And then now I get to share it with leaders. And a lot of times they don't need fluff, they need instructions. And so when I built the reports, if you look at the DISC reports, you look at the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, Working Genius, they all do a great job of going, hey, let me describe the person. And they're like, here's their strengths, here's what they do, it doesn't say, here's how you lead them, here's how you motivate them. When they have a challenge, this is how you regulate them, get them back into an empowered state. It doesn't give you actionable stuff. So our reports are actually designed to give you interview questions, designed to give you specific steps. So what kind of work should they do? What kind of work shouldn't they do? When there's a conflict between them and another person, how do you navigate that? It gives you actionable stuff. And then we integrate it with an AI so that it's not just a flat document, but it's actually so you can ask it questions and get even more information.
And that is the thing that elevates above and beyond everything else, right? It can continue to interact with you over time. And as that relationship grows and evolves, the AI is with you on the journey. And it's not just that piece of paper that you got the day after the assessment was complete, because we've already established we all change over time. And having the AI in the environment with you, you're going on a journey with a little secret weapon at your disposal.
Right. And if they're not acting like their profile, it will say, well, based on what you're saying, they're showing up differently. Here's how you respond. So it gives you insight as to what's going on with the person.
Alex, that is I am so intrigued and enamored with it. I love that in the training that it got to a point where it was giving the answers in your voice the way you would answer it, and then something. And the training in AI that I'm working with, I'm waiting for the day when it starts randomly just say, God, that's awesome. Because then I'll know that it's learned me, right? That's the trigger I have for success.
So I got to laugh at this. So I was talking with it. I've programmed it, and it knew that I had a daughter and stuff. And I was asking it about workout, and I was struggling because my weight had gone up. I was trying to get in. And it was talking about finding ways to do exercise with my daughter because health is important as a model for my daughter. And it was talking about going for walks. But one of the things it said, and this is how I knew I'd won, it's the same kind of thing, was it said, consider using your daughter as your dumbbell. And I laughed so hard because I actually do. She is my ankle weight, and sometimes I lift her up, but she is my dumbbell and she loves it and we have fun with it. But the fact that its recommendation for me was to use her as my dumbbell was priceless.
And all I've got for that is, gosh, that's awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Alex, this has been a great conversation. If you piqued the interest and curiosity from the audience, how do they find you or more about VitalSpark?
So they can find more about VitalSpark at VitalSpark.ai. Same thing, you can look for it, social media, AlexAanderud.com. The link, I believe, is going to be here at the podcast, so you can find me that way because the last name's a pain to spell. But that's got more info on me. Same thing with my social media, I'm on there. They're both a little bit different. Alex Aanderud is more about mindset philosophy. VitalSpark is more about leadership and personality, understanding human dynamics. And so depending upon what you're interested in, YouTube has a channel that has a lot of information. And there, if you want to get in touch, it's got ways to get in touch with me directly. So that's a really great opportunity.
Fantastic. Alex, thank you so much for the conversation. And in the course of our conversation today, we started with the mindset that we can't get people to do work. And the reality is that's a leadership challenge and something that we all should be rising to, because we should understand our people and what motivates them and how it is that we can get them in a place where they feel seen, safe. I think that's incredibly important that we have that space in our businesses for our employees, so that when there are periods of times where they are dysregulated, we are giving them the tools and capabilities so that they can, in Alex's mindset, stand in that, tolerate it longer without it overriding, so that they are growing that capacity. And that is a journey that we should all be on, and one that we should be coaching and guiding our teams through, because there are things that drive us all crazy. And if we get rid of the triggers, we get rid of life. And so how we manage and navigate through that is so important. And please check out VitalSpark.ai. Alex, thank you for your time. And audience members, you know the rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.